There are certain names that act almost like a reflex test for our brain.
Oh, yeah. Like instant recognition.
Exactly. You hear a name, and immediately a very specific image just pops up. You hear Einstein, you see the hair.
Right.
You hear Lincoln, you see the hat. And if I say Christopher Columbus, you almost certainly see 3 wooden ships just bobbing on a blue ocean.
Or you hear that old school rhyme, in 1492.
Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Yeah.
It is probably the most famous couplet in Western history. But here's the problem with rhymes and statues. They tend to smooth out all the edges.
Oh, completely. They turn a complex human being into a logo.
A brand.
Right. And they strip away the context. And I think in Columbus's case especially, they strip away the actual struggle.
And that is exactly why I wanted to do this deep dive today. We aren't doing the elementary school pageant version of this story for you. We have this fascinating source material, a specific biography, that literally tracks his timeline from the day of his birth in the Republic of Genoa all the way to his death in Valladolid.
And when you look at that timeline, really look at the day by day, year by year, the story isn't about some guy standing heroically on a deck pointing at the horizon.
No.
It is about a grinder.
A grinder. I love that word for this.
He was a hustler, a guy who spent decades just hearing the word no over and over. A guy totally obsessed with logistics. He dealt with tragic family dynamics. And according to the source we have, he was motivated by something very, very different than what we usually think.
Well, the motivation. This is my absolute favorite part of the research we have today. Because you grow up hearing gold, God, and glory. Right. That is the classic trifecta.
The standard textbook answer?
Yep.
Yes.
But the source material we are looking at gets much more specific. It says he wasn't just looking for abstract riches. He promised the Queen of Spain something incredibly specific. He promised to bring back, and this is a direct pull, condiments.
Condiments from China.
I have to be honest, when I read that, I actually laughed out loud. I just picture him handing Queen Isabella a bottle of hot sauce.
It sounds so funny to modern ears, but we are going to unpack why that exact word, condiments, was actually the key to the entire global economy of the 15th century.
So we have condiments, we have a weaver's son, and we have a timeline that goes from total obscurity to world-changing fame and then back to tragedy.
It is a career arc that, statistically speaking, just shouldn't have happened.
Then let us figure out how it did. Let's start at the very beginning. Section 1, the weaver's son.
The origin story.
The source gives us a hard date here, October 31st, 1451. A Halloween baby.
Effectively, yes. And the location is so crucial here, the Republic of Genoa.
Now, for you listening who might just picture modern Italy, we really need to clarify this, because this was not Italy as we know it today.
Not at all. Italy was a patchwork of totally independent city-states, and Genoa was this massive maritime powerhouse. If you were born in Genoa in 1451, you were born into a culture of trade. The Genoese were the ultimate middlemen of the Mediterranean.
Right.
They had trading posts in the Black Sea, in North Africa, all the way up to London. They moved things. That was their whole identity.
But Columbus wasn't born into that high-level moving things class, was he? The source is very specific about his actual family background.
He was not a merchant prince. He was born into a middle-class family. And frankly, being middle-class in the 15th century was a really precarious place to be.
We have the names of his parents right here. Your father was Domenico Colombo, and the source explicitly says he was a wool weaver.
Domenico Colombo. Just picture that life for a second. Weaving wool was loud, hot, smelly work. You were dealing with raw fleece, lanolin, harsh dyes. It is serious manual labor. And Domenico, by all accounts, was a bit of a chaotic figure.
Oh. Yeah, always hustling, taking on debts, just constantly trying to make ends meet.
And his mother was Susanna Fontanrosa.
Right, Susanna. She brought a little bit of stability to the household, but it was a very crowded house.
The source mentions the siblings, 3 brothers and 1 sister.
Which includes Bartolomeo, who becomes his main partner in crime later on. But just imagine young Christopher, or Cristoforo, growing up in that specific environment. The smell of wet wool, the constant clacking noise of the loom, the underlying financial stress of his father.
It sounds like a trap.
It was absolutely a trap. If he followed his father's path, he would live and die right in that shop. He would be a guild member, maybe make a decent living if he was lucky, but he would never leave the neighborhood.
So how does a wool weaver's son become the admiral of the ocean sea? Because the source mentions a major transition. It says in the 1470s he toured several places for trading. That is the escape hatch, the sea. In Genoa, if you didn't want to be a craftsman, you went down to the docks and you signed on. And that is exactly what he did. He didn't start as a captain, obviously. He started as a kid just running errands on a merchant ship.
He started at the absolute bottom.
The very bottom. But he was watching. He was learning.
Then we see a huge shift in the timeline. 1473, the source says he took a job as an apprentice and business agent for families in Genoa.
That is a critical distinction. Business agent. He is not just pulling ropes anymore. He was working for the Centurion family, who were big players. As a business agent, you are basically a fix-it man. You handle cargo, you negotiate prices in foreign ports, you are financially responsible for the goods.
So he is moving from labor to management.
Exactly. He is learning the economics of trade. He sees the profit margins firsthand. He realizes that if you buy a commodity in one port and sell it in Antwerp, the price triples. He is learning that distance equals money.
He's becoming a logistics guy.
A commercial operator. That is the exact lens through which we have to view him. He wasn't some romantic poet gazing at the stars. He was a businessman.
And then the job gets really dangerous. May 1476. The source flags this specific event. He takes part in an armed convoy.
An armed convoy. This is not just a grocery run down the coast. This is high-stakes transport. The source notes it was sent by Genoa to carry valuable cargo to northern Europe.
We are talking about highly expensive stuff here.
Most likely spices, silks, precious metals, the exact things that pirates wanted. And the phrase armed convoy tells you everything about the reality of the 15th century sea. It was basically a war zone. You didn't just sail. You had to physically defend your cargo.
And historically, we know this particular trip went wrong, didn't it?
Horribly wrong. This convoy was attacked by French privateers off the coast of Portugal. Ships were literally burned to the waterline. The source doesn't explicitly detail the swim, but this is the moment where Columbus literally washes up on the shores of Portugal.
Talk about a crazy career pivot. You start as a business agent, your ship gets attacked, and you just wash up in a foreign country.
But it was actually the best thing that could have possibly happened to him, because he washed up in Portugal. And in 1476, Portugal was the undisputed center of the universe for exploration.
And the source says in 1479, he meets his brother, Bartolomeo, in Lisbon.
Lisbon was where the cutting-edge maps were being drawn. The Portuguese were pushing down the coast of Africa. They were unlocking the secrets of the Atlantic winds. By meeting Bartolomeo there, Columbus isn't just a refugee anymore. He plugs directly into a high-level network of cartographers and dreamers.
So let us look at this foundation. Section 1 wraps up with him in Lisbon. He is a weaver's son turned business agent turned armed convoy survivor turned map maker.
He has the commercial knowledge, he has the hardcore sea experience, and now he is in the exact right place to get the technical knowledge.
Which leads us perfectly into section 2, personal life, tragedy, and the pitch. Because he wasn't just working in Lisbon, he was aggressively climbing the social ladder.
He really was, and this is where his personal ambition shines through.
1479. The source says he gets married. Her name is Filipa Moniz Perestrello.
Filipa. Now listen to that last name, Perestrello. That is a noble name.
So the Genoese weaver's son marries a Portuguese noblewoman. How does that even happen?
It was a very strategic match. Filipa's family was noble, yes, but they were cash poor at the time. Her father had been a captain, actually a governor of a small island called Porto Santo, but he had died. So the family had the fancy title, but not the money. Columbus looked like a promising, up-and-coming merchant. It was a trade.
But the source suggests he got something immensely valuable from this marriage.
He got her father's papers. Since her father was a navigator, when Columbus married Filipa, he gained access to his charts, his logs, his wind data.
That is incredible. It is like marrying into a tech family today and getting the password to their proprietary server.
It gave him the raw data he needed to start formulating his massive idea.
They have a son, Diego. But then, 1484.
The tragedy hits.
The source simply says his wife died in 1484.
And this changes everything for his trajectory. He is now a widower. He has a young son, Diego, who is maybe 4 or 5 years old. And without his wife, his link to the Portuguese nobility is totally severed. He essentially has no reason to stay in Lisbon.
So he packs up.
He takes his son and he moves to Spain. He goes from being a connected man in Lisbon to an absolute nobody in Spain.
And the source says he moves on romantically as well. It mentions a mistress, Beatriz Enriquez de Arana.
Right. He never actually marries Beatriz. She was a peasant woman in Cordoba. But this relationship was very significant.
Because in 1487, they have a child named Ferdinand.
Ferdinand Columbus. So now picture the man at this moment. He is in his late 30s. He has 2 sons from 2 different women, one noble, one common. He is trying to navigate a completely foreign court. And he is trying to sell the most expensive startup idea in history.
The pitch. The source says for a long time he pursued both the Portuguese and Spanish kings, but they refused to support his plans.
We really have to talk about why they refused.
Yes, let's bust the myth right now. Was it because they thought the world was flat?
No, absolutely not. Every educated person in 1484, every priest, every king, every sailor knew the earth was round. The Greeks had proven it 2,000 years prior.
So why the constant rejection?
It was the math. It was a fierce dispute over the exact size of the sphere. The experts in Portugal and Spain calculated that the Earth was roughly 24,000 miles in circumference, which, by the way, is correct.
Okay, so the royal experts were right.
They were completely right. Columbus, however, argued that the Earth was much smaller. He cherry-picked data. He argued that the Atlantic Ocean was narrow and that Japan was only about 2,500 miles west of the Canary Islands.
He was wrong.
He was spectacularly wrong. If the Americas hadn't been in the way, he and his crew would have died of thirst long, long before they ever reached Asia. The kings rejected him because his business plan was based on fundamentally bad math.
But he kept pushing. He was relentless.
He was a master salesman. He didn't have the best science, but he had absolute conviction.
And finally, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella Cave. They decide to consider and support the plan. And this brings us back to the objective.
The condiments.
The source is explicit here. He set out to explore Asia, specifically promising to bring back condiments from China.
Let's unpack the word condiments. In the 15th century, Europe had a massive food problem. There was 0 refrigeration. If you killed a cow in November, you salted the meat. By February, that meat was, well, difficult to eat.
It was rotting.
It was incredibly funky. You needed extremely strong flavors to mask the taste of preservation and decay. Pepper, cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, these weren't just nice-to-have items. They were essential. They were the preservatives and the heavy flavor enhancers.
So when the source says condiments, it really means spices.
Yes, but condiments is such a great word for it because it implies utility. He wasn't going to bring back fine art. He was bringing back something to put on your dinner so you could choke it down.
Oh.
And the source explicitly says, from China.
He was totally fixated on China.
He had read Marco Polo. He believed the Great Khan was waiting there. He wasn't planning to hack his way through a jungle. He was planning to sail into a civilized harbor, meet a customs official, and buy the condiments at wholesale prices.
It was a massive procurement trip.
Exactly. I will go to the source, buy the ketchup or the cloves, and bring it back, cutting out the Muslim middlemen in the Middle East. That was the pitch. High risk, infinite reward.
So he gets the ships, he gets the royal money, and we move to Section 3, Voyage 1, the risk and the discovery.
August 3, 1492.
The source lists the fleet very clearly. 3 ships.
The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria.
And accompanied by 104 men.
104 men. That is it. That is the entire workforce for this monumental task.
It seems so incredibly small.
It is small. These ships were not modern aircraft carriers. They were roughly the size of a modern tennis court. 104 men packed onto 3 floating tennis courts, sailing off the edge of the known map.
They stop at the Canary Islands first for supplies.
The literal last stop before the void.
And then they head out across the Atlantic. And here is where the source gets really gritty, because we often skip the middle part of this voyage in our heads. We jump from departure to land ho, but the source explicitly states that after 5 weeks, many men died due to diseases and hunger.
We need to pause on that. 5 weeks. That is a terribly long time to be at sea in 1492 without seeing a single speck of land.
And his men are actively dying.
Diseases and hunger. This tells us they were running out of viable food, or what they had was completely spoiled. Scurvy would absolutely start setting in by then, gums bleeding, old wounds reopening.
It changes the vibe completely. This was not some pleasure cruise into history. It was a death march on water.
Imagine the psychological state of that crew. They had been sailing into nothingness for over a month. The captain, Columbus, told them Japan was close. He lied to them. He actually kept a fake logbook to show the crew so they wouldn't know exactly how far they had gone.
He was gaslighting his own crew.
He was managing morale with strict disinformation. But if men are dying of hunger right next to you, morale is gone. They were on the absolute verge of throwing him overboard.
And then salvation, October 14, 1492.
They see a light, and then they see land.
The source says he discovered a land he named San Salvador.
Holy savior. A very literal, very desperate name. We were saved.
But here's the massive misconception the source highlights. He named it thinking it was Asian land.
He steps onto this island in the Bahamas. He sees the local Taino people. They are largely naked. They have no iron weapons. They live in simple huts. And Columbus has to somehow reconcile this reality with his grand vision of China.
Because he is expecting the Great Khan. He is expecting marble palaces and golden roofs.
And instead he finds parrots and thatched roofs. Yeah. But he is so entirely convinced of his bad math that he refuses to accept reality. He just thinks, okay, this must be a poor peasant village on an outer island. The emperor is just over the horizon.
He is still looking for the condiments.
He is desperate for them. He starts asking the locals, probably through frantic sign language, where's the gold? Where are the spices?
The source says he reaches Cuba and Hispaniola in November 1492. He is just bouncing around these islands, desperately looking for the markets.
And the fleet starts to completely fall apart.
Yeah, the logistics just crumble. The source says the crew of the ship Pinta left to explore on its own.
That is essentially mutiny. Martin Alonso Pinzon, the captain of the Pinta, basically said, I am tired of following you around. I am going to go find the gold myself. And he just sailed away.
So Columbus loses 1/3 of his fleet right there. Then disaster strikes. The source says Columbus's ship crashed and wrecked off the coast of Hispaniola.
This happens on Christmas Eve, 1492. The Santa Maria, the flagship, hits a sandbar and is completely destroyed.
Let's recap the logistics of Voyage 1 right now. He starts with 3 ships, 1 deserts, 1 wrecks. He has exactly 1 ship left.
The Nina. And he suddenly has way too many men. He cannot fit the stranded crew of the Santa Maria onto the little Nina.
So he has to make a really hard choice.
He builds a makeshift fort. He calls it La Navidad because of Christmas. He uses the salvaged wood from the wrecked ship. And he leaves 39 men behind. He tells them, wait right here, pile up the gold, I will be back.
And he limps back to Spain. The source says he reached Spain in March 1493. Completing the first voyage.
He returns with some gold trinkets, some kidnapped Taino people, a few parrots, and a massive story. I found the route. I found the islands near China.
And that story was enough to trigger the massive sequel, Section 4, Voyage 2, The Colonizer.
The jump in scale here is just unbelievable.
It really is. He gets back in March. He sets sail again in September 1493. A 6-month turnaround.
The Spanish crown did not hesitate. They went all in on the IPO.
Look at the sheer contrast in resources. First voyage, 3 ships, 104 men. Second voyage, 17 ships.
17 ships.
And almost 1,200 men.
This is the precise moment everything changes. This isn't a small exploratory expedition anymore. This is a massive operation. It is an invasion.
1,200 men. Who are they bringing?
They weren't just sailors this time. They were soldiers, knights, priests, farmers. They brought livestock. Pigs, horses, cattle. They brought seeds. They were coming to stay.
The source notes that in November, he discovered 3 islands. It also says he named the colony Santo Domingo. And then it uses a very heavy word. It says he conquered the island of Hispaniola.
Conquered. The mask of the simple trader slips completely, and the colonizer appears.
But wait, what happened to the 39 men he left behind from the first trip?
When that massive fleet of 17 ships arrives back at La Navidad, there is total silence. The fort is burned to the ground. All 39 men are dead.
All of them dead.
Killed by the locals. It turns out the men Columbus left behind had started heavily abusing the local population, stealing their food, assaulting their women. The locals finally fought back and wiped them out entirely.
So Voyage 2 basically starts with the massacre of his own men.
It sets a dark, incredibly violent tone for everything that follows. Columbus now has 1,200 hungry, heavily armed men looking for vast amounts of gold that simply isn't there. He has to feed them. He has to pay for the ships.
And he still hasn't found the condiments from China.
No soy sauce, no pepper, no cloves. So he has to find a new commodity to justify the massive expense. And history shows us what happens next. When you can't find commodities, you start treating people as commodities. This is where the severe tribute systems begin.
He's trying to force the business plan to work, no matter the human cost.
He is a desperate CEO trying to show a profit to his board of directors, the king and queen, and he is failing.
The source says he set sail back to Spain in March of the next year,
leaving the colony in an absolute state.
Which brings us to Section 5, Voyages 3 and 4, The Decline.
This is where the story gets deeply tragic and honestly strange.
Voyage 3, May 1498. So we're a few years later.
Notice how the momentum is slowing down.
He leaves Spain with just 6 ships.
Down from 17, the investors are getting serious cold feet.
He sails a different route, further south. The source says after 2 months, he landed on the island of Trinidad.
And then he enters the Gulf of Paria, and the source explicitly says he touched South America in August.
He finally hits the actual continent, the mainland.
He does. He sees this massive body of fresh water pouring into the ocean, and he realizes that a small island couldn't possibly produce a river that big. He knows it has to be a massive landmass.
But he doesn't fully grasp what it is, does he?
No. His mental and physical state is seriously deteriorating by this point. The source specifically mentions he returned to Spain in bad health.
Bad health. What are we actually talking about here?
Severe arthritis. Gout. His eyes were constantly bleeding from infection. He was starting to see visions. He actually wrote back to the king and queen that he believed he had physically located the Garden of Eden.
The literal Garden of Eden.
Literally. He thought he was sailing slightly uphill toward earthly paradise. He wasn't the sharp, calculating business age anymore. He was a very sick, highly mystical, desperate man.
And when he gets back to the colony at Hispaniola,
the colony is in full revolt against his brothers. The king and queen are forced to send a royal investigator, and they actually arrest Columbus.
They arrest the Admiral of the Ocean Sea.
They do. Between Voyage 3 and 4, he was sent back to Spain in literal chains. He came home in shackles because his management of the colony was so disastrous.
And this is the craziest part to me, he talks his way into one more trip. Voyage 4, the final attempt.
May 1502. He is 51 years old now. He is actually banned from visiting the very colony he founded. He isn't legally allowed to dock in Santo Domingo.
He is an outcast in his own discovery.
He is just desperately looking for a passage through. He still firmly thinks if he can just get past these annoying landmasses, he will finally find China.
The source says he reached Hispaniola, obviously couldn't stay, then discovered Central America, and next year reached Panama. And here's the bait. The source says he found a small amount of gold there.
Just enough gold to keep him hooked, to break his heart all over again.
He sees the gold and he thinks, this is it. But then the source says he was forced out of the area by the local people.
The resistance in Panama was incredibly fierce. They actively attacked his ships. He couldn't establish any sort of foothold.
And the logistics fail him one last spectacular time. The source says he faced a lot of problems with the ship and the crew.
Problems is putting it very mildly. His ships were getting completely eaten by shipworms. The wood was literally turning into wet sponges beneath their feet. He had to deliberately run them aground in Jamaica just to keep from drowning.
Wait, Jamaica?
Yes, he was shipwrecked on a beach in Jamaica for an entire year, a full year, 1503 to 1504.
The great explorer, just stranded on a beach, literally waiting for a ride home.
It is such a pathetic image. He had to deal with armed mutinies from his own men right on the beach. He had to trick the locals into feeding them by using an almanac to predict a lunar eclipse. He was using every single trick in the book just to survive day to day.
Finally, he gets rescued. The source says he returned to Spain in 1504.
The absolute end of the line for his sailing career.
Which brings us to the final chapter, Section 6. The final years and legacy.
He returns to a Spain that has, quite frankly, moved on without him.
The source says he settled in Seville with his son after the 1504 return.
He basically spends his remaining time writing angry, bitter letters demanding the titles and the money he firmly believes he is owed. He feels completely cheated by the crown.
And then, the end. May 20, 1506. The location is Valladolid.
A valid death.
The source says simply, died due to illness. He was 54.
54. By our modern standards, that is incredibly young, but you have to consider the sheer mileage on the man. The noisy wool shop, the burning armed convoy, the 4 grueling voyages, the shipwrecks, the severe diseases. He used that body completely up.
And the source ends with this quote, "Following the light of the sun, we left the old world."
It is undeniably poetic.
It really is. But I have to ask you, based on everything in this deep dive, do you think he knew?
Knew what?
Do you think he knew he hadn't actually found the condiments? Did he die knowing he had stumbled onto a complete new continent? Or did he die thinking he just failed to find the right market stall in China?
That is the great historical tragedy of Christopher Columbus. He went to his grave insisting it was Asia. He simply couldn't let go of the original business plan. He couldn't admit to himself that his foundational math was wrong.
He was entirely stubborn to the very bitter end.
He found a new world, but he completely refused to see it for what it was.
So let's zoom out here for the listener. What does this deep dive really tell us?
I think it tells us that history is incredibly messy. It tells us that discovery isn't a single heroic moment. It is a brutal, drawn-out process, and it tells us that the main drivers of world history are often shockingly mundane.
Mundane.
Yes, condiments. A middle-class kid trying desperately to escape a smelly wool shop. A business agent looking for a slightly better profit margin on spices. We build giant marble statues to these explorers, but usually we are just looking at deeply flawed people who were trying to close a difficult deal.
It totally grounds him. He wasn't a god. He was just a guy with a really shaky business plan, bad math, and a whole lot of nerve.
And sometimes, for better or worse, that is all it actually takes to completely alter the course of human history.
Well, I will certainly never look at a bottle of soy sauce or hot sauce the same way ever again.
Nor should you.
Thank you so much for helping us unpack the logistics of this legend today.
It is always a pleasure.
And to you listening, I want to leave you with one final thought. The entire modern global economy, the very shape of our interconnected world, was essentially kickstarted by a failed grocery run. If he hadn't been so obsessed with proving his bad math right, the timeline of contact between these two hemispheres would have been radically different. Next time you see that date, 1492, remember the 104 men, the desperate hunger, and the missing condiments from China? Stay curious.
Keep digging.
We will see you in the next deep dive.